Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Thriller Podcast. What's new this week, Mike?
We're doing something a little different this week on the podcast. It's been nice publishing on the Mitch Rapp podcast with the big announcements in the Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, and now Don Bentley universe. But something's nice about going to a first-time author, a debut book, and someone who knocks it out of the park with Connor Sullivan. What'd you think about Sleeping Bear?
Dude, so when you suggested this, you actually recommended, I think when did this book come out? Last year? 2 years ago? You dropped it, and I was like, nah, I hadn't heard of it. You kind of like, yeah, you should read it. And you did say it was going to be, I was like, is it going to be a series? You're like, I'm not sure. And I just don't have time, unless we're going to cover it for the pod, or you tell me you have to absolutely read it, which ultimately means we're probably going to end up covering it on the pod. Do I, get to do it? I mean, would I peek behind the curtain? Would I like to read more books? Yes, I would. And I think eventually I will once my kids are older. But for right now, I'm reading it. Anyways, that's a long-winded answer to say I'm so happy that we did this for the pod, because I'm so happy I got to read this book. This reminds me of when we did S.A. Cosby's Blacktop Wasteland.
Yep.
Blacktop Wasteland.
Yep.
And
I was like, dude, you got to pick it up.
I find myself craving these one-off, a really well told story.
Right.
For we're not worried about setting up a universe. We're not worried about IP. We're not worried about 10 books from now. I want to tell the most kick-ass story right now. And this was it. Dude.
Yes.
An aging, I just kept on thinking, oh, this is what we wanted from Mitch Rapp. We wanted an aging Mitch Rapp, after the fall. This is Anna, no, it's not, but it's an interesting concept to put someone who was a pretty deadly operator, someone who went in and caused bloody January in Russia after his wife dies. And now he has a bum knee. And he has these daughters. I'm imagining because it's set in Montana, I'm imagining Kevin Costner and Yellowstone and this kind of thing. But also he has the background of Jason Bourne, or thinking about Jason Bourne 30 years, post from, or, even a Liam Neeson. Think about the guy from Taken. He's still badass, and you could see early on, he was even more badass. This book it hit so hard for me.
Oh, totally. You're right. I really have elements of all these other authors I love being pulled in. And I don't know if Connor did that consciously or not, and who his influences were. We're hoping to have him on the podcast. And just to back up a little, part of the reason we're covering this book is because next month he releases Wolf Trap, book number 2. And I think you're right, Chris. They're both standalones. I don't believe Cassie Gale is in that one. I think it's a different story. Hopefully it will be set in some of the same areas, from Alaska to Russia, Montana. I feel like Connor did that so well. But we're hoping to have him on the podcast. Absolutely would ask, were your influences Vince Flynn and C.J. Box? Like you said, Yellowstone makes me think of a Joe Pickett. And he's pulling in a lot of strains of different types of storytelling and using them all. And I think one benefit of that is the plot. I know you've said a lot of books are propulsive, like Chris Howdy. There's definitely even some Chris Howdy elements in here. Everything is paced out so well. And one of my favorite scenes in the book, we're going to kind of just jump right into this, I guess. But one of my favorite scenes is almost the murder mystery or the kidnapping mystery. When we're with the, first, it's the drunkard of a local sheriff or whoever he is, community police guy. And then later it's a much more competent detective, and they're on the trail in Alaska, and they're taking the boat and the shotgun, and they find the shards of the tent. And then later downstream in a different campsite, they find the backpack with Cassie's gun in it, and everything's not adding up. And then you throw the dog element into it, that the dog was severely injured. Later, the dog definitely senses a couple of people who are fishy, like that police captain guy. And it's almost a mystery book. And then we go from a mystery to, oh man, this is a Russian prison story.
Right.
And it goes to the highest level, and it's really bold. Putin is a character here. I wanted to get your take on that.
That was interesting.
Yeah,
that was
and
interesting.
We're inside the Russian elites, and these are old like Soviet era kind of traditions of betting on these criminals and putting them in. And then we got some Hunger Games going on, right?
Right.
And then another element or genre is the science aspect, because I looked it up, and these Sharashkas were real early at Soviet era, going back to the 30s, science labs. So they actually did experiments with humans, and they published a lot of this crazy, insane stuff. So we've almost got a scientific psychology aspect going on here. We've got mysteries, kidnappings, a Soviet era time period feel. I just feel like there's so, and then we got a Western, out in the ranches of Montana too. So I can't believe how many elements Connor pulls together, and it doesn't become a mess. It really is a propulsive plot, a compelling story that could very easily get overcrowded, and these elements can compete against one another, yet they don't. They kind of harmoniously sing, and the book moves along in a really, really exciting way.
Yeah, I was going to say that too, that this book is almost like definitely two different parts, two different, stories, but they feel more connected as one, continuation, and it doesn't get bogged down with some of the, the technical aspects of it, but it reads, it does have like some of those nuances that you like, and, bits and pieces that you find in other, with other writers in this genre, but it doesn't like try to, do everything all at once. Yeah, no, I agree with you with this whole propulsiveness, and like I was almost like disoriented reading the first couple chapters. Like we're with the SEAL who gets taken. You don't, I guess. Do we find out he's a SEAL right away? Anyways, we know he's in the military, and he gets taken, and then you cut immediately to this woman, and we don't know like why is she calling this cell phone, and her ex-husband, or we think it's her ex-husband, it's actually her dead husband. You're like, where are we right now? We're in the Yukon, then we're going to Alaska, and then the description of the scene with the attacks, right? Both attacks are very disorienting the way they read on the page, or as I was doing the audiobook, they listened to, and then like the picture slowly like comes together.
Yeah.
With this murder mystery, the father tracking down his missing daughter, but he kind of does a nice job like weaving in that this guy, has a past, and there's something about him that's a little off. So when it's revealed that he was in the CIA and that all this stuff, it's not like super jarring. I will say, I have to, sort of cite my sources. I didn't immediately come up with this myself, but upon finding it on the internet and reading it, it does kind of make sense. And I think like, a lot of these stories you have to sort of suspend your disbelief. Do you think it's interesting how, she just happens to stumble upon and get captured in this program by, this guy who's running it, and he was tortured by her father. And I think it was in a book review I was reading who she gave I was just trying to find like a plot, some notes for the pod, and I stumbled upon this book review, and she said while she enjoyed the story at all, like that was the one thing that she kept getting hung up on, and she almost would have preferred it to be like he was vengeful for X amount for 30 years, and that he was setting this whole elaborate trap up to like bait her to come, or like took advantage of it and knew that she whatever anyways.
I'm gonna agree with you. The coincidences, and that's not the only one. The fact that her father was searching for this Sharashka, this secret Soviet prison lab out in the Kamchatka Peninsula, and she just happens to be taken there. One, that's a big coincidence. And then two, the other coincidence is we randomly pull out that the scientist, who's also a prisoner scientist at the lab, randomly
is the son of the asset, right? Who got killed, right?
He was the son of the asset who got killed, that Robert Gaines, or Gale, the main character, Cassie's father, was trying to get out, right? And he was one of the children of the family that was our asset, and he was trying to get out, and Evgeny killed him, and There was this whole convoluted plot, which I was like, oh, this kind of works. It kind of checks out. But then that random coincidence comes up that he wants revenge on Sokolov because Sokolov's been writing these forged letters, pretending that his family's really alive to give him a false hope, to live and complete the mission for the Russians so he can maybe one day be reunited with his family. It's a little forced. So on surface level, this book bangs right out the gates. Like, you're reading it, incredible. You close it, oh my God, what a story. I think the second you dig in under the surface, things like that pop up. And then the over-reliance on these chemicals, because one, there's this like tear gas, whatever, that knocks you out from these canisters. Okay.
The devil's breath, as they call it. Yeah.
Well, and then devil's breath is also this other thing. And then there's the injection, right, with some level of truth serum in it that almost makes you an automaton. And then a third layer that it just gets a little silly is these guards with these like lobotomies. And so they're brainless, like super soldiers who just take orders and they're programmed to do whatever their programmer asks of them. We're getting into a touch of sci-fi with stuff like that wasn't really grounded in reality. So if it's grounded in reality and the science backup is there and that's what you're expecting, sure. But once you dig in here, you realize these are just devices that are there because they need to be there. And
and it wasn't until I read the review and she pointed it out that I thought about it.
Right.
Like in the moment, I didn't care that,
agreed.
This was a huge coincidence. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was cool. Like there's been times where we've read other things and I don't know, maybe it's because we're looking for it or it's, in a serialized fashion, you're looking for those tropes and they've been super glaring, but I don't know. I was enjoying the book too much to like let me get bogged down by something that I should be suspending my disbelief on. So.
Right. I think the way I'm going to account for that in the scorecard is a buy-in on a believability scale is close to a 0 or a 1. But
sure.
Buy-in of the story as I'm bought into reading this thing is an absolute 5. It's a cracker of a story when you're reading it. So I think I have to take buy-in down a little bit because of the believability. But by far the plot is going to get a high score to make up for that because it's almost okay that it's not believable. This is fiction after all. And if the story can have me gripped where I'm willing to suspend the disbelief as well as this one did, that's going to have a great plot score. So if the buy-in's a little lower, the plot will be a bit higher.
Oh, well, speaking of plot, why don't you go ahead and let's talk about a couple of our favorite things we liked from the plot. We're not going to do a whole super deep breakdown of the entire plot, but I think it'd be interesting to pull out certain moments that we really enjoyed.
Yeah. And I think we talked about kind of what I liked in the first third of the book, the mystery in Alaska, putting the clues together and how these various detectives are everything's falling into place. And then Gail sees something that seems off and we're tracking down clues. So I like that part. But my other shout out would be the bookends. I think the opening and the closing of this book really do exactly what they need to. And in fact, did you catch, I wouldn't have even realized this, even reading the book twice. The first chapter is Paul Brady, the SEAL, being taken. We have a cold open with the canister being thrown into his campsite, and we hear that he's a Navy SEAL. We kind of forget about that, right? Because chapter 2, Cassie comes on so strong. We're loving everything about her. And the SEAL, again, doesn't pop up until way, way, way later after she's taken to the Russian prison. But I kind of forgot that was a cold open. And it's kind of cool because it's planting seeds of when this thing is happening to her, it's kind of familiar. Yet I didn't remember that it happened to Paul Brady in chapter 1. Then when she meets him, I'm like, wait a minute. We knew about this. And so I love it's calling back to those very opening scenes. And another part that's setting up that sequence that draws you right into Cassandra Gale is the bar scene. I think some of the characters in that bar, from Ned and Darlene who own it, and then this group of, rough and tumble guys who eventually they get in the fight and she breaks his pinky. I really like that bar scene. It establishes who Cassandra is. It establishes the setting. And it establishes, we don't know this yet, some pretty nefarious stuff going on, because these they come off at first as very homey, caretaking, welcoming, and hospitable people running this inn and this restaurant and this bar, Ned and Darlene. We can trust them. And when when the carpet is pulled out from under us, that's like a Howdy twist right there. Chris Howdy.
Yeah.
And we learn that they're in bed with the Russians, and he's an agent named Kodiak. You could see that as a coincidence, but I was so bought in. I saw that as a major jaw-dropping moment that I fully was invested in.
Yeah, there's a lot of clues that I think if you reread it, you know,
Yes.
you can begin to pick up on little subtleties. And I'm not going to toot my own horn here, but I did pick up on Darlene acting super fishy. Like, I think he did a very good job to, like Connor did, to write it where it reads both, you know, perfectly normal, as well as, you know, she's like, oh, I wish of course, I'm not the quote guy, but she's like, oh, you're alone? Like, what, you know,
Yeah.
you're, like, because we've already seen the one kidnapping.
Exactly.
So I'm kind of like primed to be looking for, in a murder novel, you're kind of like, and then I guess if it was a full murder mystery, that would be like a misdirect, right? That would be a good chance to do a misdirect, like have someone seem suspicious, but they're not. But that's not ultimately what this novel is. But yeah, I kind of picked up on that from the very beginning. And, you know, that scene reminds me of, have you seen the movie Wind River?
No.
With Jeremy Renner
No.
and
I'd like him
Elizabeth Olsen. You got to watch that movie. It's really powerful. It's about, like, Elizabeth Olsen is a FBI agent. She goes to investigate a disappearance in Alaska. It's in Alaska or in Montana. It's somewhere where there's snow. Yeah, in this setting where, you know, it's super. And then Jeremy Renner is a fish and, like, game warden, and decides to help her on this quest. And you know, there's just lawlessness, and you have these guys who do oil rigging. They come in and they think they own the town. And the woman who's missing is a Native American. Really good movie. So I was getting, like, you know, Wind River vibes from this. You know, you have these seemingly nice Canadians who work on the logging, and you have tourists who come in. And there's obviously, you know, disappearance that are going on. Hey, I won't say it now because he's gonna. I think he might be my wild card winner.
Really?
But
okay.
There's one guy who we meet, I guess in Alaska, who's really interesting. But yeah, I'll save that for later. But yeah, the first half of this novel, they're both so good.
It's true.
I can't. I feel like I do like it a little bit better, but
yeah.
I don't know. I enjoyed them both.
I think I like the first half, but you also have to appreciate the last, 50, 60 pages. There's a Flynn style race to the finish line.
Oh,
with the action sequence breaking out of the prison. I mean, at first she tries to sneak out by basically kidnapping the guards and putting on donning their uniforms and trying to get out. She's caught doing that. It's like the first great escape falls flat. But then the second one is spectacular because this thing's going to blow and the scientist is on their side and you need one of the prisoners who can fly the helicopters. So you have to break out with them. But also the SEALs are coming in because Papa Gale went undercover with, what'd you think of more of this tech stuff? The contact lens, which was actually a camera feeding right back to the Situation Room.
What did you think of the microbot that
the buzzer?
Yeah.
He swallows this like nano buzzer attached to his belly. And so only he can feel the one-way messages. If it buzzes once, what was it? The SEALs are on their way. And if it buzzes three times, he's on his own.
He's on his own. Yeah.
That was kind of cool. We didn't end up needing that. But again, another kind of genre pull or thriller pull that some authors lean into that Connor is tugging on. And this whole end escape. So, right, they try to get out and the helicopters are getting shot. And then they see another team land. And Paul Brady, being a SEAL, is like, look at their maneuvers. Look at their tech. Look at their gear. Those are Americans. And you're like, they're saved. But wait, there's a helicopter chase. And the Russians scramble the MiGs. And we scramble our fighters. Oh, and then they sacrifice themselves. One chopper goes down. while they're floating in the ocean to distract the MiG. Oh, it's just a really cool finish. So I think you're right. I like the first half more in terms of the plotting and setting it up and this mystery we're taking on. But I really, really appreciate the action sequence at the end. It felt like Memorial Day, if I'm being honest.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. And like what I was saying, like he doesn't hit you over the head with the tech specs the entire novel, but it's like it's pretty hardcore when it does show up, and it's necessary. Like it's cool, you know.
Yeah.
You can tell that he did his research, and he even has like a concept. I looked up it's a real concept Lockheed Martin aircraft that the FBI uses to take Gale, from Alaska back to DC to get them there in like 2 hours. Like
right.
It's like little things like that like make this the plots sing. But yeah, I would agree with you. I think the action in the second half, awesome. Also that the scene where he has to land land the
crash landing.
The crash landing.
Yeah.
The
Gulfstream.
The Gulfstream.
G650.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
That was really cool, and just the whole sequence of him calling the air traffic control and them having to like get a hold of the military. Like it was a lot of like steps to get there, and it was very like cinematic in its approach. And I didn't feel like it was bogged down at all. It kind of it read perfectly.
Yeah,
very suspenseful too,
which is surprising because he's doing a lot. It could be borderline too much. This soup or this stew could just have far too many ingredients. Yet somehow the broth is just so good and so deep that even if it's overstuffed, the broth isn't lost in the soup or the stew. It's a little imbalanced, it's a little top heavy or ingredient heavy, yet it's so packed with flavor that it's okay, that it still works. I'm a little hungry, if you can't tell. I guess one other line that we're not even getting into is we hinted at it earlier. There's also a ton of callbacks that just go deeper and deeper when Gale calls the secret number of the CIA contacts who basically were his handlers, and we get the whole background. Once again, we said
the one
Putin
is now the director, right?
Exactly. Yeah. One's the director now. I think Susan Carter. I kept wanting to call her Peggy Carter, but Susan Carter's the director. And there's this old-timey spy, Prescott McGavran, who kind of sacrificed his career. He could have been a bigwig, but when this project, the Stryker program it was called, and when Gale gets shot and his asset is killed, and the whole thing seems to have fallen apart, he kind of goes to ground, and McGavran just takes like a desk job at the CIA somewhere. But he's secretly, under Reagan's orders, running this mission. And Gale, his code name is Pegasus, and Pegasus lives and calls this guy who's secretly still on mission going back to the 80s or whatever it was that Reagan authorized them to do this secret op. And he copied the files illegally. So he risked everything to copy the thumb drive to run the files. Like, that's yet again another element that could seem overdone and overstuffed. Yet when you're reading it, you're all in. And maybe it doesn't all check out. Who knows? But it doesn't even matter because it's so cool when we're getting all this revealed. We got Putin on one side, Reagan on the other side. It's just, there's no way you could pull that off, yet he does.
Yeah, and this whole idea of Gale or Gaines being this, being run by this ultimate spy master and being, a top operative, one of the top operatives, and like, they flesh out his badass career, like he put in the work on the ground when he was young. He got really close to discovering like this what would be a huge find, because at the time I think they were purchasing or kidnapping exclusively other countries' military personnel to do tests on it, and then present day they're not just military, but they're anybody that they can get their hands on. And in Chicken, Alaska, Eagle, Alaska, like all the towns in Alaska just named after birds.
I looked up on a map Eagle, and yeah, it's exactly as described. You cross the border, this is the first place you hit. You know, you got to imagine it's got the bar, it's got the post office, and that's about it. And I felt like I was there. And I heard one interview Connor did with the Crew Reviews guys. Gotta love the Crew Reviews. And he talked about this Alaska Triangle. And he's from Montana, so you could tell he really enjoyed writing the parts about the Gale Ranch. But he said he was shocked reading all these reports of missing persons cases up in Alaska and how there is essentially this triangle of land just across the border that has so many unsolved cases. And he even said he got to speak with a bunch of people who had crazy stories, some of them who were missing cases for long periods of time and then reappeared. And he said a lot of them had connections to 3-letter agencies of various sorts. And I just can't believe that part of it's real. Out of all the stuff he's making up to tell a really good story, the part about these missing persons cases across Alaska and this distinct area of land that's intertwined with a lot of espionage stuff, and you know, it's got to have Russia connections being up in the Northwest there. Oh, that was real. And he talked to people and he had research, people who disappeared themselves and came back decades later. And that's wild stuff. And to bring that into the thriller as well as he did and create a Cassie Gale, like, let's talk for a minute about how awesome of a character she is. I don't know if he intends to expand the series because you're right, Chris, his next book, Wolf Trap, coming out, I don't believe is like book 2. I don't think it has these characters. I'd be down.
At least from the log line, it doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm down for a Cassie universe. Absolutely. Almost like Haley Chill. I would love to see 3, 4, 5 books with her and Paul Brady. They have to go to Montana, you know? That was the epilogue. So I would love to see more of this.
That was interesting. Like all 3 of them like get the SEALs, let them go, capture Ned. That was, you know, yeah. I guess it was cute. But, you know, she is like the 3rd female to graduate from Ranger School, yep. And like obviously can hold her own. We see that throughout the entire novel. I'm totally down to expand that universe. I'm also down to learn more about Gale. Like,
sure. Who was the protagonist? Who was the main character? Was it him?
I think Gaines or Gale. Yeah.
You don't think it was Cassie?
Or they're both. It's kind of like a split.
The family.
Like, the family.
Yeah, true. Well, while we're on her, let me give you a description. I don't have too many quotes. I think I was so caught up in this book, I didn't even want to stop to take notes or write anything down. I knew I was absorbing it, and I wanted to stay in the story. So it's almost a good thing for a book when I don't have too many quotes. Although the opposite, the inverse is true. When I have a lot of quotes, it means I love the writing so much as well. So
yeah, sometimes when you don't have a lot of quotes, you're not vibing. So
it's true. But sometimes it's because I'm just into the story so much.
Yeah, you're busy reading. Yeah.
All right, but here's this one. Quote, Cassie was in her early 30s, 5'5" and very fit. With short ash blonde hair and dark sapphire eyes, she wore little makeup and her skin was deeply tanned and sun-spotted due to many years out in the extreme elements. As a result, she was more handsome than beautiful. And at this stage in her life, that suited her just fine. I'd take an origin story. Seeing someone like that go through Ranger School would be super cool.
Yeah, definitely. Someone she's been through so much.
Yeah.
All of these characters have been through so much. It's a lot in the book when you actually like sit down and think about it.
Yeah.
But
like my stew. I like that pack stew.
But there's a lot left on the bone that he could easily turn this into, something.
Yeah, this could absolutely be a universe. Yeah.
I'm also fine if we never go back there. It's such a nice standalone piece of art, piece of literature that just leave it there.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm kind of digging these. If we could, someone who's willing to tackle a new thing, get me to buy in, because I was bought into, invested in almost every single one of these characters. Like, agreed. I cared about when the French, Billy French died.
Billy French, yep.
We spent maybe 4 chapters with him. Like,
yep.
I despise Ned and those boys. I was bought in for Gale, and his Montana crew, and Cassie
Yeah.
and the dog. Oh my gosh, the
Oh,
dog.
the
I was
dog.
so sad.
Oh,
Yeah.
and Peter Trask, I think, is someone we can identify with, right? He's not in the family, but he's married into the family.
Right.
He kind of is a different persona than all these ranch hands, tough guys. Yeah, I feel like everybody played a role so well and was crafted with really delicate care to either be larger than life or life size in a way that we can identify with. Every character was both larger than life and human at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah, it was great. So speaking of, you said doing something new, you're going to feel that way when you read Deep Fake, the Ward Larson book. We're going to have him on next week, and I see a lot of parallels here. It's a completely different story, but Ward wrote a one-off, a book not related to...
Is it out yet?
Yeah, no. We have a copy. We got an early copy. We're going to have him next week because I think the release date is early March. I think first week of March. So by the time you guys hear this, book should definitely be available. Deep Fake, he's doing something different. Not in the universe of David Slayton, his Assassin series, yet every character he creates, you either love, hate, or can really identify with. The story is way different. The way this whole Alaska missing persons, Russian Sharashka has not really been done before, I feel. Ward finds something that has never been done before. And just like Connor gives you a lot of head fakes, who's the bad guy, which side are they on, who took Cassie, you get a big head fake in Ward's book, Deep Fake. So it's a really, really interesting twist. So I think this movement for the podcast, covering some slightly outside of big series books, I think is something I like to do, and we should try to do more.
Yeah, because it's also like just I didn't feel as daunted like getting into this and being like, oh, well now we're gonna have to do 5 books,
Right.
I mean 10 books, 20,
Right.
23 books. It's nice to know I like covering some of these newer authors that are getting like a lot of this buzz because they tend to only have 1, 2, 3 novels. I mean, in 2 months we could cover pretty much all of Don Bentley's books because he's only done I think 3 of his own and 3
the Matt Drake
of the
books,
Jack
yeah.
the Matt Drake, 3 of the Matt Drake books and 3 of the Jack Ryan Jr. books. So yeah, no, I like it. No, I'm not trying to say that I don't like these long series. It's just refreshing at times.
Something different, yeah. And we're going to do that also covering Kyle Mills' Fade, because we know part of him stepping back from Mitch Rapp is to write book 2 of the Fade character that he loves. Let's cover that one. I'd be really excited to go back to his earlier works and something we know he's very proud of and cover that. I guess that would be on the Mitch Rapp pod, but we got a lot of work to do, Chris.
And also, I would like to go back. Have you read any of the Mark Beeman story? I'm surprised he referenced Fade and not he wants to get back into Mark Beeman.
Mark Beeman, yeah. I wonder if Mark
Did you read
Beeman
Rising Phoenix?
Yeah, we read Rising Phoenix. I don't know if he's in Storming Heaven. I have a copy of Storming Heaven I was going to read. I think that is a Mark Beeman book. Yeah, I wonder if he ran his course with Mark Beeman. I'm not sure how he ended with that character. Dude, the Thrillerverse, it's just too big. It's bigger than the MCU.
I know. All right, let's get into the scorecard, dude.
Let's do it. Yeah, back to Sleeping Bear. Action, plot, what are you thinking here?
Oh, the action's got to be like a 9.5.
So good.
It's I don't really have I don't know why I don't give it a 10. I mean, I could just give it a 10.
Yeah, I don't know. It's close. I think it's flirting with it.
Tell me why it shouldn't be a 10 then, I guess. Make your case for the 9.
Okay, that's a good point.
Because there's a decent amount of it, and it's all pretty good. The helicopter scene, all the ambushes and attacks, even like the various attacks we get with like the law enforcement when Gail gets kidnapped by the rogue state trooper, and you get all these. Well, it really bothered me. As a side note, I listened to the audiobook. I didn't mind the narrator. I forget her name.
I thought she was good. I thought she was very.
She was very good, except for how she said "vimple" or like I don't like the word "vimple." I guess I'm just I'm
Is that
used
the pronunciation
to
though?
them.
I assume that's the accurate pronunciation.
No, I'm almost positive it is because
Right.
the VWY, like that's what it would sound like. It just drove me nuts every time she said Vimple.
Yeah,
And
I hear you.
call them Spetsnaz. That's what they are. They're Spetsnaz. Like like I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I think overall though she was really good.
no, she was very good. She
There was
did the
one-
Russian like pretty good.
She did the Russian lady really, really good, and I think the old man Sokolov really, really good. There was one or two like minor characters that, and obviously you can't fault anybody for this. They sounded so similar. I kind of lost track of because we had so many police
Sure.
detectives coming in and then going out, and then we also had so many minor characters because there was the bar fight crew, but then there was also Gail's crew of his like assistants back from his ranch, and so I don't think that's a fault of the narrator because there's no way you can have 20, 30 different voices clearly distinct.
I think with anyone they'd have trouble like trying to distinguish everybody.
But I do think that's maybe one area where Connor can clean up a little bit, strain the soup a bit, just because that might be one area where there's too many cooks in the kitchen from all the different police detectives we rotate through. And I know they each had a different role to play. To all the different farmhands who are coming in and helping out and lending a hand, to all of his family members, because there's Emily and there's Trask and there's the dog and there's Cassie. Maybe just a little overloaded on the cast of characters, but I digress because that's not action. I think I'm going to stay at 9 on action. I think you could make the case for 10. I don't know what's missing, but I'm like, I just think that extra edge that makes it like the hit on the JCTC in Extreme Measures or that final helicopter sequence in Memorial Day. It's close, the action throughout this book, but I'm not sure it's there. So I'm going to stick with
that. I just keep thinking of that final helicopter scene with the MiGs and the F-22 Raptors. Like that was pretty cool. And then they tell them to put on the wetsuit and then they hop out.
Yep.
And then also the crash landing of the the plane. Like
and he's on with the control tower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going 9.5.
9.5. You got me. Compromise. 9.5.
All right. What about the plot?
High praise for the plot. I think it really is paced very well. I think it's amazing. It had me gripped the whole time. I'm going to give it a 9. I'm just not going to go to that 10 because of the believability. Of course, that's going to bring down my buy-in score. But I could see a few times people rolling their eyes because some things are just so coincidental. So I'm going to say 9, great score. Just going to take off that point because of sometimes coincidences were added to the plot just because they needed to be or we wanted them to be and not because it naturally could have happened or should have happened that way.
Yeah, I think like mine's a similar argument. And even though like I didn't mind the overstuffness, I think it could have been trimmed up, a little bit, and then so that's why I can't give it a perfect 10 because we'll save that for rare cases where everything is needed, necessary, and hits. Whereas like this hits, but anyways,
with an asterisk.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then buy-in, I don't know. It's like a 3. Okay. It could even be lower. I could go to a 2 because it's a pretty crazy ass story. It has elements. He's pulling like elements of like things, but when you put everything together, it's like a pretty unbelievable story. It's almost as bad as like Hannibal having a virus that can only take out Muslims. Like we're verging on that territory.
Yeah, blowback territory. Again, 100%. I'm gonna go with that too. Because I think the book made up ground, getting my 9 and 9.5 on action and plot, that I've got to ding it somewhere for this complete. I cannot imagine any part of this actually happening this way. It's too coincidental. It's too over the top. So the 2 points I'm giving a buy-in are purely because I was so bought into the actual story, and hence the 9 on plot and the 9.5 on action. So I'm going to leave it at that too. Good guys, bad guys. We talked about a lot of characters here. What'd you think of the cast of good guys and bad guys?
The good guys, I think I got to go 5. I really enjoyed,
really? Okay.
Especially if we're going to characterize the 2 protagonists mainly as Cassie and Gail, I really enjoyed them. And then all of the, their family, the stuff that came with them, I really enjoyed those characters. Also, like, she was kind of like ended up being minor. I thought she was going to be more important, but the pregnant, like, law enforcement officer who was like heading up the investigation in the beginning, like, I thought she was a cool character. I was like interested to see where she goes. Ultimately, she leaves, and I thought at first I thought they were going to kill her off once Ned, said, "Oh, Vance can fly you, to." But then I realized he was actually going to fly Gale down to whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I'm giving the Good Guys a 5. I really vibed with them.
All right, I'm going to give the Good Guys a 5 for everything you said, and I'm going to hold off on my last character who pushes it up to a 5 until my free space. So 5 for now on Good Guys. There's one other person.
I also held off on a good guy. I wonder if we have the same good guy.
No, we don't. We don't, because I know who yours is. I have a sinking suspicion, and mine is slightly different. While I'll agree with yours, I have a slightly different one, so I'm going to hold off on that. But let's talk bad guys. Let's talk villains. They're okay, right?
The bad guys, they weren't bad. They weren't like amazing. Like Darth Vader, Nazar Katan,
Rafik Aziz,
but they're not bad. So I think you could go, I don't want to say a 3, but 3.5, 4. It's verging on 4.
Yeah, verging on 4. I thought 3 was a little low, so I made up ground with that 3.5. So yeah, close to being great. I think the woman was great, Yarmakova. Sokolov.
Yeah, she was probably the best villain.
Right.
So Sokolov almost was like the least impactful villain.
Yeah.
Like
one-dimensional.
And I think
very one-dimensional.
I think he wanted him to be. He was supposed to be the big bad.
Yeah.
But like I said, like I think if he had actually been conniving and manipulative and searching for Gale for 30 years, I mean, I guess he thought he was dead. But he knew he didn't get his daughters, so, searching for those daughters, in whatever means possible, weaving that in somehow would have made him more interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like when you throw in Yamakova, Putin. What do you think of like having Putin being an actual character in this novel? We didn't really touch on that.
I'm a little surprised that it happened.
It took me out of it sometimes.
It did. I was just going to say it.
But he also referenced Reagan, and I didn't mind that as much. I don't know.
That was much more of a light touch, though. That was a much more just say it in passing, filling in some backstory. To actually have words in Putin's mouth and scenes with him, it took me out of it a little bit. It's one of the rare times I probably would have just wanted a fictional, made-up president.
Putin in his post-coital state in a robe.
Yeah, it got a little weird. Kind of took me out. Like, whoa, we're doing this. Okay. I think when you write about real world leaders, it's kind of like what Kyle said, right? When he wrote characters, whether it was Christine Barnett of Lethal Agent or Anthony Cook or Catherine Cook, it's like you want an equal amount of people to scream at you. Why did you make that Trump? Or why did you make that Hillary? Why did you make that Bernie? Like you want it to come from all sides, which shows you that you've made a character that is not a one-to-one, but pulls elements of all angles. Yeah. And by putting Putin there, you're just a little too on the nose, about who this character is. And I'd rather see some creativity to make somebody up. Or you don't even need one, right? Why'd you even need a president or Russian prime minister or leader involved? To scramble the MiGs at the end? You could have just had some general pull weight with some general and make him do it, kind of thing. But
yeah, no, you're right. He could have been thrown out, and the story is perfectly fine. So. All
right, but the setting.
That's why we ding the bad guys.
Yes. I think there's only one thing you can do for the setting, and it's to hit that 5. Hit that % sign on your keyboard.
Smash that 5 right there.
I have to.
Yeah, he does a really good job of, we go from, we get a light touch of Montana, not that much, but like a lot of the Yukon Territory, Alaska, really like trying to understand when we're moving from one place to the next, like physically how much distance that is. And then also like the description of Russia. And like, I think one of the key things is when Cassie first wakes up in the forest. Like she notices that, oh, it's different flora, different fauna. Like I am not in Montana. I'm not in Alaska anymore. And it's like those little touches, to set that setting that, I think elevate this novel. And you can tell like he cares about nature, cares about the location, and it definitely shined in the novel. So
it's so haunting, the scenes when they're on the river, going to the campsite, got the shotgun, scare off that bear, find the tent scratched open, send it to a forensic lab. And then even the dog, right? They find the dog outside the campsite and picking up little bits of evidence. I was right there. I was in the story. I was in Alaska. I felt cold. I can hear the rushing river stream nearby. 5 out of 5. And then the Russia stuff was good. Not as good, but also enough to carry that 5. So I'm doing it. You want to do the cover or the free space? What do you think?
Let's do the cover. You didn't post me the covers though. I can't see them.
Well, there's only 2, so Google it up. I mean, it's a newer book.
Okay.
It was actually 2 years ago. It was 2021 it was published, but got the original hardback.
I thought it was like that. Okay.
Yeah, original hardback was the one you saw all over social media when it was dropped and in the lead up to the launch. Pretty nice white background with these red splotches. One of them in the middle, the center, turns into a mountain range, so very Alaska feel, but it's almost a bloody Alaska. So there's something dark happening here. And you do get the
and that's supposed to be like bear claws, right? That's supposed to be the bear claws.
Oh.
Like the 4 stripes is like because they even mentioned that like bears can have 3 to 4. Like that's like the bear ripping the cover. It's sick. It's a sick ass cover,
dude. You're right. Oh, I love that. And the font is pretty cool. Font is very different.
I like the different font.
And it works, yeah. Very blocky. Oh, dude, the bear claws, like ripping the tent open. Well, it was fake. It was simulated claws ripping the tent. It was actually a knife. Oh, I love that. Yeah, so that's a great cover. And then the Kindle edition, what do you think about this one? Because there's some cool things going on here.
I kind of like the Kindle edition a little bit. I like the original cover, but I kind of like the Kindle edition a little bit better.
I think so too.
It's cool. They're in the forest. There's a clearing, and the clearing's in the shape of a hammer and sickle, and there's someone walking, and then there's footsteps. Is it footsteps? Is it bear steps?
Bear tracks, yeah.
Bear tracks? Like, what are we doing here? It's intriguing. It makes me want to, gives me that sense of loneliness that is really, that I think Connor does a really good job of explaining the desolate, while there's a lot of beauty, there's a lot of isolation out there. And this cover, like in one page, is able to convey that to me.
Yeah, dude, I agree. That's great.
I'm going a solid 4. It's not like, I guess like I'm giving it a 4 because I like the Kindle one better than the original. Like that's my only reason why I think I can ding it from a 5 to a 4. But
yeah, I think I'm going to a 4. It's pushing on 4.5, 5 territory. More I think about it, I just think there's something to be said if you ask me some of my favorite book covers.
4.5. And I think it's more 4.5 because I like it better than. It's new. It's different. There's not a Running Man in Russia.
Are there?
It takes a chance.
Are there power lines? Let's zoom in here. Do we see power lines running across the Siberian forest?
That hardback takes a chance with like different kind of blocking, and I like it. I'm going
4.5. I just don't think I can give it the perfect 5 because if you ask me my favorite cover of all time, I wouldn't come to this. I think it has a chance to push into the top of the list, 5, 10 maybe, but I really wouldn't consider it in the upper echelon. So yeah, I think 4.5 is the right move here.
We have the exact same score here, Mike.
Do we really? Wow.
Yeah. I'm agreeing on everything.
We're on the same page here. 43.5. And that assumes 5 points for the free space. All right. Can I take a guess?
Yeah, go ahead.
You loved Earl. That dude in the office with all of the maps and the pins in the map of every missing person case color-coded by decade. That's the point. I think you love the color-coded by decade so we could track where people go missing across the wilderness for the last 40 years. Earl?
You got it. It's Earl. I I also like the fact that he used to be FBI. He's retired. He's still working this case. He
True believer.
Has all this information. Yeah, like I don't know. He was a real quirky character that in the end was super beneficial. Gail needed him, to make his case to the president, to be even allowed to go over to. And he's the reason, because he mentions that there's a missing seal.
Yep.
And he knows he's tracked it, that the seal stayed at the same place that Ned owned, so it's most likely he was also trafficked. So it's definitely him.
And without that tidbit of information, the president may not have authorized the mission, because they needed to know American military were captured and held here as prisoners.
It gives him a little more cover, to justify his actions. Yeah.
Another cool note was when Gail flies him and says, "You come with me to Washington, where I'm going to pitch my case on this." And they meet Prescott McGavran, basically Gail's handler and this old-timey spy, and he knows Earl. Earl and him have communicated and worked together. That made sense, these two old-timers. Yeah. All right, a little one that when she comes up is awesome. We kind of move on from it. It gets forgotten, but the indigenous native woman, I think Eve was her name, and her son.
She's cool. She's a cool character.
The way she's staring at Tobaluk, the drunkard police chief, because he basically ruined their town, and he ships in the booze and he's making money off of it. And he's breaking the law. He basically ruined these native people's lives. And then she has this look in her eye. She can spot evil. I think it was really smart for Connor to tap into the native indigenous element of this, because anytime you're up in that territory, Yukon territory, Canada, and up there, really smart to bring in that perspective, because it's so important to the heritage, the people, the lifestyle. These are not Western American settlements throughout most of history. That's very recent. And so I think having her really provide that extra insight, that almost supernatural vibe that sometimes these cases need, was a really smart play. And to tap into that was a lot of fun when she had that missing piece of information.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's a good pick. Good pick.
Dude, good stuff. Great book. I hope we get to talk to Connor Sullivan real soon as we lead up to book 2, Wolf Trap. Go ahead and pre-order that. Chris and I got our advanced copies. I know your dad's reading it. You and I will hopefully read it before next month when Connor comes on the pod.
Yep. All right. We need to thank our patrons, our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, Kevin, Daryl, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review using Apple Podcast or Spotify. You can find us online at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at Thriller Podcast. And as always, just like Gail, be Gail.